Hello, everyone. Welcome to International Business, unit number 5. In unit number 5, we're going to be talking about foreign direct investment. So, what is the foreign direct investment? Is pretty much when we decide to allocate some capital and invest it in another country, or we decide to fully open operations in another country rather than just exporting a certain product or having a licensee that delivers our product. Is when we decide to go fully or more informed and put some money into another country. Okay, so in this case, for example, in the first one, I want you to watch this video. This is from the Brazilian government. So, FDI, or foreign direct investment, countries are always looking for FDI because they know that they will make the market more competitive and the industry will grow, there will be employment, and there's tons of benefits. Of course, later we're going to talk about what happens when we have more investment rather than we do it somewhere else. That is a problem because also that causes a deficit. A country that has a lot of FDI abroad is good, but having a lot of FDI in your country, there's a level where it breaks the balance, and that's not very good because we have issues. Anyways, you look at that one, you see many governments are always trying to attract foreign direct investment. In the case of Korea, for example, I was reading an article the other day, and maybe I'll put you the link in there, that Korea is failing to attract foreign direct investment because the environment is not suitable in terms of many companies struggle with translation, and it's not, how to say, it's not a global environment. It's not an English. Well, it's not welcoming companies because of the language, and because the whole environment is very secretive, and all the regulations are still in Korea. So many multinational companies are very scared to come in here because they know that the game is not fair. On the other hand, Korean government says, well, we could provide tax incentives for them to come, but that will be putting the local companies in a disadvantage. So it's a very tricky situation. So anyways, that's about Korea and this one. So in this case, like I said, the FDI is a firm invests directly in new facilities to produce or market in a foreign country. So again, we put some money to another country, into the production, into ways of developing a certain product abroad rather than letting someone else do it. The FDI varies. It can be from 10, 20, 30% to 100%, no? To be a fully greenfield venture. We will talk about that one. Okay, so when we talk about FDI, we need to talk about the flow of FDI, which is the amount of foreign direct investment undertaken over a given period of time. So we have to talk about, as a country, how much I put abroad and how much companies from abroad are putting into my country. So we have to have a good balance, because in the end, when we have, well, a surplus is never bad. I mean, if we have more foreign direct investment in other countries, it's good. But if we have too much FDI in our country, it's not good, because again, that creates a deficit, and we'll talk about that. So in this case, we will generate the outflows, as that one, I guess, flows out, and inflows, the one that is coming in. Then we have the stock of FDI, which is the total accumulated value of foreign owned assets at the given time. So in this case, also we talk about just the external one. Okay, so good. So trends in FDI. Usually we have that powerful economies have a foreign direct investment. Yeah, like if we talk about US, the European Union, they have had a lot of foreign direct investment into other countries because they have the power, because they have the economics, etc., etc. But this has changed over the past 35 years because companies have realized that investing in markets that, even if they are riskier, they generate more profit. If you say, well, let's do foreign direct investment in India, that sounds tricky because maybe the political situation is not that great, and perhaps maybe the infrastructure in general, the external environment is not fantastic, and it creates risk. But with great risk comes great reward, and that is where this is shifting. This is changing to the economies that are growing economies, right? And that is helping globalization as well. So in this case, like I said, historically, most FDA has been directed at the developed nations of the world. Why? Because again, in this case, when we invest in America, it is more likely that it's a stable market, everything's stable, and it will work well. But like I said, nowadays, it's going into the different direction where we invest in more tricky markets, risky markets, but it pays off. So that's a good thing. So okay, let me fix this. Give me a minute because I think all the audio is sounding. Well, hopefully it's fixed. So in this case, for example, when we talk about global trade, we have realized that the trade is moving always. No, we're moving goods from one place to the other, but because of many situations, this keeps on changing. The world's not stable. Companies have realized that investing in other countries and really putting and setting operations there is better than just relying on importing and exporting goods. This is a bit of a long documentary, but if you really want to understand the rise of FDI, you need to understand how trade has been working throughout long time. Trade is a key thing of business, and again, you need to understand it as a professional business. If you don't understand the history of trade, most likely you don't get the depth of it in the current environment. So I'm not gonna see it now. So in this case, we have, for example, two areas that we can look at. If we want to do foreign direct investment, we have acquisitions versus greenfield. So in the acquisitions, acquisitions are much faster and attractive because let's say, for example, you're a large company and you want to set your operations in Vietnam, but the problem is you don't know the country, you don't know the regulations. It involves too many processes that you are not familiar with. So what is better to say, there's a company that is producing a very similar product to yours, they are not that successful, or they are mildly successful, and they have the facilities, the employees, the permits, everything. So what would you do? Just acquire them and then refine their processes, and then of course set your operations there, right? Just scrap the name, and now we put their Procter and Gamble, and then we owe their facilities and their production line and everything, and then of course that is an acquisition. On the other hand, we have a greenfield investment. A greenfield investment is completely establishing the new operation in a foreign country. So let's say that we are not happy with any acquisition, or they are too expensive, which happens as well. So in this case, we are looking at just setting up everything. We're going to go and do the market research the regulations to operate in the country, the capital needed, the risks involved. And once we calculate everything, then we go and set up fully our operations in there. Okay. So why FDI? So in this case, we have to talk about two things, exporting and licensing. So when we're talking about exporting, it means I will put my products in another country. However, what happens when you start to realize that your good, it takes too long time, or it's very difficult to export into that country because the tariffs and taxes are so high to import a certain product, that you realize that for me, it makes no sense. I mean, I'm spending more on transportation on the long run, maybe in 10 years down the road, I spend more money on exporting and paying taxes, fees, transportation, logistics, etc., than just setting up a new factory there. Yeah, maybe I have to spend 20 billion in the factory, but on the long run, if I just export my product, I will spend 35 billion. So again, this makes sense, right? And the same thing for licensing. Licensing is when you grant the right to produce a certain product or service to another company in another foreign country. In return, you will get a royalty fee for every product or service that they provide, But the problem with the licensing is, again, that you don't have full control of what they're doing. They are using your brand, and you told them how to do it, but in the end, you cannot completely control their operation. So in this case, this can become a problem because they may end up either stealing your product or services in some certain way, because the patents, somehow they find ways to go around them and they use your product, or in the end, they don't deliver the way that you want, and then that ends up being counterproducing, because they produce products that are not up to the standard that you are willing to provide, right? So in this case, like I said, we choose better foreign direct investment than exporting, because we may end up paying too much taxes, transportation, etc. And the other one, like I said, we have limitations of the licensing. Like I said, we could give away our products, or in the end, we cannot control it completely. We rely on someone else's effectiveness, and sometimes companies abroad are not that effective. Okay, so we already talked about this. This is what I was speaking about right now. So now, for this matter, we also have the eclectic paradigm. So in this case, we're talking about that we choose to do the investment, the foreign direct investment, because we have location-specific advantages. In this case, we could be using resources that, let's say, for example, the production or the human resources are much cheaper in that location, or we have access to regional in many markets. Let's say, for example, I want to set my operations in Vietnam. And that is good because regionally you can cover a lot of countries in Southeast Asia. You can cover Malaysia, Thailand, Cambodia, etc. So you cover a lot of markets. So that's good for you. That foreign direct investment, you choose the country that perhaps will be better. In this case, regionally, Vietnam is not that good because in the end have a lot of regulations, but more in a free market like Thailand is a good option, right? And on the other hand, we're thinking of externality. So externality happens when there's a knowledge spillover or spillovers in many areas. That means that, for example, a certain market will become more knowledgeable. Let's say, for example, I want to set manufacturing of cars. Thailand, a good example. General Motors set up their operations in Thailand. So for this one, they generate knowledge because the industry starts to move. The automotive industry starts to move in there. There's companies that are created because of tires, because steering wheels, etc., from locally developed. And then, of course, that's a good spillover in terms of economic spillover, and there's knowledge spillover because also employees to get more knowledgeable on how to do this production of cars, right? This one, that's an example. So in this case, what are the benefits for the host country? Like I said, we expect that when we open a country for foreign direct investment, there's going to be knowledge transfer, technology transfer, that otherwise it wouldn't happen. So that means we're going to bring expertise, we're going to pass knowledge to the employees, they're going to improve a certain industry over time, right? And then we have the employment effects, which is, again, it creates a lot of jobs, new jobs. In this case, we have to be careful with the FDI whether really is beneficial or not. It depends again on the country, and I'll give you the example of Kia in Mexico. Whereas in terms of employment, yes, they generated a lot of employment with their plant, but they do not transfer absolutely any knowledge. Why? Because all their processes are very, very secretly kept. So in this case, it is more of cheap labor, and we have to be careful within when it's cheap labor and when we really are willing to transfer knowledge and make it happen. It's the case of, in the other case, we can talk about Sony. Sony, the Japanese company for electronics, believes a lot in technology transfer, knowledge transfer, and throughout their factories around the world, they let them develop new products. So they teach them the basics, they train them, they involve them in the process, and then at later stage they can create also products that they go back to Sony headquarters in Japan, and then of course it's a win-win because in the end the flow goes back and forth. So in this case, like I said, we can have the balance of payments account. We have to record countries' payments and receipts from other countries. So how much we export, how much we import, and of course that generates a surplus or a deficit. Again, for us to invest more in other countries is a surplus than companies investing in ours. So in this case, we have to be very careful. Well, the countries have to be very careful of how they promote foreign investment. Of course, in this case, when there's a deficit, they change the regulations, and for us as a company, it affects us when they decide to change the game, the way the game is played. So when foreign investment is set up in a certain country, we have to understand that there's effects on competition and economic growth. When there's more competitions, the prices are lower. So we have more competitive prices, and also there's more competition. The local companies also start to be more competitive and develop better products because otherwise they go down in the market. But that is also a problem as well, because if, let's say, a very large company sets up their operations in a certain country and they try to compete with the local companies, and the local companies are not good, they're gonna be cannibalized by that company. They're gonna start to be consumed by them because they cannot compete with them. They have to close, and then you have a monopoly. So in this case, that's something that shouldn't happen. In this case, like I said, also we have also possible adverse effects on host country balance of payments, which is the capital outflows as foreign subsidiaries repatriate earnings to the parent country. So in this case, we cannot pull the profits to our country. They have to stay in there. So, or the other way around. Also, it happened, for example, and I'll give you an example here of many of the hotel industries in the Caribbean islands. So in this case, they were saying that, oh, you know what? It's very good that we have a lot of hotels in the Caribbean islands, like for Barbados, etc., because we generate a lot of employment and we generate a lot of business and the economy is good. Yet when the analysis was done, economists started to realize that hotels in there, they make a lot of profit, but they don't reinvest it in the country. They take the profit all out and they leave the country with nothing. Yeah, they pay some taxes, fair enough, but I mean, it is not precisely what really develops a country. Because they don't reinvest it. See, they take everything. So they are just squeezing money, taking it out, and that creates a problem, right? When we have the FDI, can mean some loss of economic independence or national sovereignty or autonomy. We can say that, for example, if there's too many foreign investment, we start to have very little control of our products, or we can say that the foreign companies control a lot our assets. This is the case, for example, of oiling companies in the Middle East. Many oiling companies, many governments in the Middle East started to worry about, because too many foreign companies are controlling their oil assets. So in this case, it's good because they have the knowledge, they implement it there, but in reality the problem is that they control too much the industry. So here we have both encouraging outward FDI or encouraging also inward FDI, or restricting outward FDI or restricting inward FDI. So in this case, what we're talking about, very simple, is countries will find policies to make people come, make people invest. Like, for example, again, I go back to the example of the Middle East. They want the companies to come because they don't have resources. So they want them to come, invest, try, because they know the only way for their economy to grow is to bring a lot of companies in, right? As compared to them having a lot of companies abroad. So there's countries that have a very strong focus on promoting a inward FDI. Also, there's many countries like, for example, like Germany, which encourages a lot of outward foreign direct investment, meaning in this case, for example, Germany gives you subsidies, they give you resources, they provide tools, and other countries, for example, they have these chambers of commerce that you say, okay, you German company, you want to invest in Korea, well, we have a liaison in there, we have an office in there, they already know the market, they already can give you a lot of insights about the market, but please do it. I'll lend you some money, I'll cut taxes off in the home country, but go and invest there. Okay, expand your market. But again, the other one is also we have the restriction that it also companies they want to control that, and then they may restrict them for investing in other countries because of political reason or taxation or etc. Or the same thing restricting inward, right? Like China, for example, when we restrict inward foreign direct investment in China is because we want the capital to be Chinese and to remain in China. We don't want a flow of capital outside of the country. So, given this unit, we're gonna close with the international institutions that promote foreign direct investment. In 1995, the WTO, World Trade Organization, was founded, and this has helped to regulate FDI and make it more efficient and make it less risky. So throughout many regulations, throughout many policies, companies of certain countries feel more confident of investing in other countries. Very good. So that's it for this week, and I'll talk to you very soon. If you have any questions, please let me know. I'll see you soon.